Good morning. Thank you for attending the webinar. We value your participation. This presentation will be started by me, Vatsala Dhananjay, and I will be talking to you on the legal aspects of foreign direct investments, and this will be followed by a presentation from Mr. Thambakad on the tax and financial aspects. Thereafter, Mr. Raghavendra will guide you through the world of financing and practical aspects of locating the land. We will be taking your questions at the end of the three talks. I will be starting my presentation firstly by giving you an overview of the laws which govern foreign direct investment in India. The first is the Foreign Exchange Management Act, which is always enlarged, modified or clarified by the Government of India from time to time. The second act is the Special Economic Zones Act, which was passed in 2005. I will be guiding you through some of the important provisions of these two acts later in this presentation. The types of funding as a foreign direct investor could be in your individual capacity. It could be as a corporate. So basically, we are talking about foreign direct investment and foreign portfolio investment, as you can see. And foreign direct investment is further subdivided into the automatic route, the government route, and investment by NRIs, PIOs, and OCBs. NRIs means non-resident Indian, PIO means person of Indian origin, and OCB is an overseas corporate body. And investment in the special economic zone. These four sub-investments do not need a very large amount of government permissions. In fact, they are fairly simple to get. And that is why it is called foreign direct investment without the intervention of the government. The foreign portfolio investment and venture capital investment will be spoken to more about by next presenter, Mr. Thambakad. I will now start my presentation with one aspect of the law, which is special economic zones. Special economic zones are deemed to be foreign territory. They are large self-contained areas for manufacture of goods, rendering service, trading, warehousing, and they must earn foreign exchange for the country, and they are exempt from import duty, service tax, sales tax, stamp duty, and income tax holiday. They can be developed by the private sector, public sector, or by the state government. And the developer of the SEZ unit is to identify the land and apply for approval to the single window agency. What I want you to understand about special economic zones is that they are basically used by the government to encourage foreign exchange. SEZs are generally used by each specific sector for its own business through various sectors, which I will explain to you in my next slide. You can see some of the sectors. This is not an exhaustive list. The minimum land area differs from each sector. The minimum area also differs depending upon the place on which the SEZ is located. Although there are certain capitalization norms, these can be relaxed on application to the government. The minimum land area differs from each sector. The minimum area also differs depending upon the place on which the SEZ is located. Although there are certain capitalization norms, these can be relaxed on application to the government. Now I move on to the next act, the Foreign Exchange Management Act and the subordinate legislation created by the press notes. I will also be comparing them with the SEZ laws. I have already indicated to you the sectors which are allowed through the special economic zone. Now I am listing some of the sectors which are allowed under the FEMA. Again, this is not an exhaustive list. Now, agriculture. I want to emphasize on agriculture because the thumb rule is foreign direct investment is not allowed in agriculture. However, there are certain exceptions. Floriculture is allowed, horticulture, pisciculture, animal husbandry, development of seeds, cultivation of vegetables and mushrooms under controlled conditions, and services related to agro-industries. When I say services related to agro-industries, it could be production of cheese, it could be pickle industry, it could be refrigeration and transport. The next one is tea plantation is also allowed, subject to disinvestment of 26% equity within 5 years in favor of an Indian partner. Real estate is another sector which is allowed by foreign direct investment under the FEMA Act, and 100% FDI is allowed in the following sectors in real estate. Real estate construction and development are allowed through 100% foreign direct investment. It is clarified that real estate trading is not allowed, whereby without any value addition, you buy or sell land or land with building and sell it at a profit. I move on to hotels and tourism, which is a subsector of the real estate industry, which is defined to include restaurants, beach resorts, providing accommodation and food. It includes travel agencies, wildlife experiences to tourists and other leisure activities, and convention centers. This is a very important slide because if you want to invest through foreign direct investment in India, you have to fulfill two minimum criteria. One is the area of the land which you intend to buy. The minimum area is defined, not the maximum. If you want to make housing plots, the minimum area is approximately 25 acres. If you want to build, it should be about 5 lakh square feet. That could be a hospital, or it could be a hotel, it could be a commercial complex. In case of a combination, any one of these two above conditions will be enough. The second requirement is minimum investment, which you have to make. The minimum capitalization is US $10 million for wholly owned subsidiary companies and $5 million if you enter into a joint venture with an Indian partner. The speaker coming after me, Mr. Tambakad, will guide you through the requirements of wholly owned subsidiaries and joint venture partnerships. The funds will have to be bought within 6 months of commencement of business, and the repatriation can be done after a period of 3 years from the time you bring in the minimum capitalization. 50% of the project must be developed within 5 years from the date of obtaining all statutory clearances. I move on now to another foreign direct investment, which is made by non-resident Indians and persons of Indian origin, which is, again, I have shown you clearly where this stands in my third slide. All NRIs and PIOs are treated on par with Indian citizens to buy commercial or residential properties. The speaker coming after me, Mr. Tambakad, will explain in more detail the definition of a person of Indian origin and who is deemed to be a non-resident Indian. If you buy and sell properties in India and you want to repatriate them out of India, you will be allowed to do so up to 3 properties and up to $10 million per financial year. If your investment is made in the rupee account, it will remain non-repatriable. NRIs and PIOs cannot purchase agricultural or farmland or plantation land. However, there is no bar to inheriting the same. All the lands which we have talked about here has to be purchased privately. The government of India has by and large washed its hands of procuring land for FDIs, except for large infrastructural projects like airports, etc. State nodal agencies like KIADB rely more on the developer to procure their land and do not want to get into controversies with farmers for such procurements. However, I must say that KIADB has promoted large SEZs like Apparel Park, Biotech Park, IT Park, etc. and has been quite successful in doing this. I want to talk about title due diligence. The first thing that you have to understand is there's no guarantee for title in India and there is no insurance. There are several farmers who own large tracts of land. Each farmer might have 1 acre or less of land, and therefore the title history and due diligence is very important because each of these will have a different title history. Great clarity is required and investigation regarding pending litigation, prior agreement holders, the land use prescribed for that area, and we rely on public notice to rule out many of these things. There is also a problem with alienation of scheduled caste lands, which are lands allotted to such scheduled caste by the government and for which alienation is prohibited. And if a purchaser buys such a land, the title will not pass. There are cases where the farmers have married 2 times with 2 wives and several children, which are not evident, and the due diligence should cover this too. I have given you a brief overview of A, the main laws governing FDI in various sectors with special focus on real estate, and B, challenges of title due diligence. Any question that you might have will be answered all together at the end of the 3 presentations. I am now handing over the mic to the speaker after me, Mr. Tambakad, for the financial aspects of FDI. Thank you.